Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidira. The time is 9:35 Central African time. Beautiful morning here in Johannesburg. And we're going to be switching gears now to, I think, a different aspect to this genocide in Gaza that we normally don't talk about or don't read about as much as we should. Because as the bombs continue to fall on Gaza, so too does the land beneath the feet of his people. The territory of Gaza Strip is not only a humanitarian tragedy, which is an important aspect, I think the most important one out of everything else, but it's also an environment which is under siege. According to recent assessments, more than 97% of Gaza's underground fresh water is now unfit to drink. There's been sewage spills freely into the sea. Trees and farmland have essentially vanished, and debris of war now blanket the earth of Gaza. And today on News and Views, we'll be speaking with genocide scholar and activist Dr. Zarni, who's going to be exploring just how what we've been witnessing in Gaza isn't only about the bombs and the bullets and the lives that are being lost. It's also environmental catastrophe that may amount to ecocide. It's a phrase that I have used for the first time today, and I'll be trying to understand along with you guys what it is essentially, and how the land of Gaza is being threatened, the livelihoods and the future of an entire people is now at stake. Dr. Zarni is joining us via our virtual streaming platform from Istanbul, Turkey. Doc, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Salam Media. Really appreciate you giving us your time.
Thank you very much for having me on your show.
This is a very, very important aspect of this genocide that is really being spoken about, the environmental impact on Gaza's water, its land, its air. How would you describe what's happening in terms of Gaza's environment right now, and the damage that is being done to its environment, the phrase ecocide, and what essentially means for the people of Gaza and what's currently happening to that part of the world?
Well, the first thing that we need to understand that this is not just simply impact or accidental impact to the ecological system without which no human beings or no animal can survive. This is done intentionally by the state of Israel, not just simply by the trigger pullers of like drone attacks or tanks or the executioners of the Israeli Death Force (IDF). This is done at the highest level of policy making. As early as the first month of the genocidal onslaught in response to Hamas's resistance along the Gaza border. The policymakers have, basically declared that they want to make Gaza unlivable, and that's evidenced that they have followed through by the satellite imagery and some the videographic images coming out of Gaza. The Gaza looks like now the face of a moon. Many of us remember like moonwalking, the surface of the moon, you see? And I think that this is a genocide that has really pushed the parameters of what we understand genocide beyond human imagination. I mean, there are two things that we need to understand. One is the Genocide Convention talked about creating conditions, basically material conditions of life, or material conditions that are designed to make life impossible. And what we have seen is destruction of the habitat, not just like physical infrastructure, the sources of life, water. You mentioned water and cropland. More than 80% of the Gaza's cultivable cropland has been destroyed. I think like about only 20% are cultivable now, and then the coastline, the Wadi Gaza, that is the main source of the underground water. Wadi that means riverbed or river in Arabic, as you know. That's destroyed, and not just simply that. The military, um, even in peacetime, by their military exercises daily, are one of the biggest polluters of the environment of all institutions. And we're talking about active military for 2 straight years, day and night. And so I think, the environmental pollution, even without direct harm to the population, is another factor. And then the other one is the amount of explosives, the most of which were provided by the United States, to the tune of over $21 billion. That's like $21 billion worth of explosives in many forms. Drone bombs, drones like 1,000-pound bombs dropped from F-35 fighter jets, artillery fire from the tanks. All of that combined has been estimated to be about 150,000 pounds of explosive. 150,000 pounds. Dr. Mustafa Bagauti, a very prominent Palestinian medical doctor and a parliamentarian based in Ramallah, he just calculated that that's about 68 pounds of explosive per person. If you could, I think, to give you a comparative understanding, the Hiroshima that was bombed in August 1945 with the atomic bomb, the Hiroshima received about 27,000 tons of explosive, right? Now we're talking about 150,000 tons. I mean, how many times more? So so I think that this is going to have a major impact for the future. And some of the assessment coming from the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, some of the public health and environment, the research centers around the world, in Turkey, in Washington, D.C., all of their findings point to the fact that it would take another 25 years, one generation, to recover, even with limitless financial resources. We're talking about even clearing up the rubble. 55 million tons of rubble. Remember, this is a place that is heavily densely populated in concrete buildings. We're not talking about, burned houses. We're talking about concrete rubble. 55 billion ton. Yeah, and it's still, it's not done yet. Israel has raised that, not over 90% of the human built infrastructure, and on top of that is the intentional destruction of the ecosystem.
How strong is the argument that the environmental damage in Gaza could be treated as a separate crime against humanity, or a different dimension of this conflict beyond the immediate acts of violence that we're witnessing right now?
Very solid, very solid. That's why I think, aside from the number of Palestinian killed, or died under the rubble, some estimates would point to over 400,000, and then what has been reported by the mainstream media is like 67,000, close to 70,000. That's a vast underestimate. In addition to the mass extermination campaign that Israel has carried out for the last 24 months, this is an entirely new and additional dimension of what we understand as genocide since the convention was adopted in December 1948 after Auschwitz. Almost 3 years after Auschwitz was closed, the convention was adopted, and this is entirely new, unprecedented. So I think that some of the legal scholars have coined the term ecocide, and there have been debates, panels sponsored by the International Criminal Court on this very subject of what is now addressed as ecocide, right? And that we are biological beings and we cannot be treated as separate from the environment or vice versa. Therefore, I think that there has to be a different charge, because Israel is setting a very, very bad precedent for other states, especially in an age where like a nuclear saber rattling is often heard. Like Russia has been talking about it, and then Donald Trump and the Pentagon have been talking about surgical nuclear strike. There is nothing surgical about nuclear weapons. If that we are in Gaza, we're talking about conventional weapon used against innocent population. That under medieval siege for 2 years. If you include, the nuclear attack on human populations, what we're talking about, you cannot contain. You can contain the tank fires. You cannot contain the contamination effect, and radiation travels thousands of miles. We're talking about nuclear winter and all that stuff. I think we are looking at man-made accelerated extinction in certain region. If any nuclear power, which Israel is illegally, although Iran got singled out for the wanting, or even having a civilian nuclear program. And so I think that this is an issue that needs to be taken seriously. Unfortunately, the international law and international the courts are very, very slow. And then on top of that, the powerful UN member states that can do something to either to stop the genocide or to put in a new international law. To hold emergency sessions at the Security Council, to say that we need a new legal instruments and we need the international, enforcement mechanism. So, as you know, just yesterday, the International Court of Justice has, issued another advisory legal opinion, telling, basically demolishing every single lie that Israel has put out. Through the media in the U.S. and BBC and others, Israel's going to ignore it as long as, its master, the United States, gives Israel a blank check. So in this scenario, I think we cannot afford as a collective humanity to have another, major foundational crime, destroying the habitat of a population or large populations across vast regions. I mean, we have to stare down this threat of potential for nuclear war. We have about 6 known nuclear powers in the world, and now we are moving in a very fast into that scenario where nuclear strikes become, openly discussed. I mean, it's unthinkable in the Cold War. Even Soviet Union and the United States, they did not threaten each other with the nuclear strikes. Now, both Russia and USA are talking about this, and only China remains the global power that remains restrained in their language. I
Mm.
mean, like the discourse of like extreme belligerence is coming from Washington and also Moscow, to be fair, to the West. And so I think, like, I think that those of us on the street, citizens with very little power except to take to the streets and to educate fellow activists and other citizens concerned about this situation. This situation, goes beyond 2.3 million Palestinians, or however many is left after 2 years, and we really need to start talking about not simply mass extinction for like a normal industrial pollutions that we have been unable to effectively rein in, but the new the war and genocide related ecological destruction. That has to be a new crime encoded in international law. And but the law itself is not going to stop it. It needs to be enforced. And we need enforcement mechanism. Otherwise, the law cannot be universally applied. If the law is not applied universally, it loses its potency. It loses its purpose entirely.
Mm, And just finally, before I let you go, Doc, and I know from this moment, this would be a wishful thinking kind of question, but if we were to begin a reconstruction of Gaza's environment right now, what priorities would you propose? What must happen for life to rebuild, not just to survive?
Well, the first thing is Israel must be forced to give up any control of aspects of Gazans' lives. From border, but the border crossings. The only border crossing that can be open now is the Egyptian border. The Rafah. I was there almost 2 years ago in the Israeli side, Kerem Shalom crossing. I heard the bomb explosions intermittently inside. I was just about a kilometer outside of the Israeli gates in Kerem Shalom, and so I think that the most important thing at this moment is to have a completely uncontrolled, unrestrained flow of water, fuel, food, medical supply, anything that is needed by the Gazan. And the second one is the total withdrawal of the Israeli occupying force from Gaza, and Gaza reconstruction cannot take place when Israel continues to control and turn the tap on and off as if the humanitarian aid flow is a bargaining chip. It is not a bargaining chip. It is an absolute, the lawful, moral, and legally binding order from the International Court of Justice for Israel to allow this. This is, human lives in Gaza is not a bargaining chip for Israel, and that needs to be removed. And of course, finally, the question of continuing nearly 6 decades of illegal occupation, that has to end. That means 700,000 American funded Israeli land thieves, euphemistically called settlers, they need to be moved back to the 1948 line of Israel. Right, and the illegal occupation, that is the ultimate goal, and get the settlers out and the settlements. I mean, the thing about it, 700,000 settlers, about 200,000 of them in the West Bank are armed with submachine guns with 100 to 200 rounds of munition. All of that is paid for by the United States. Most of these land thieves are Americans or Canadians, and mostly Americans from Brooklyn and San Francisco, Oakland, Chicago, right? And so I think we also need to have a big picture, end the occupation, and then make Israel and the United States, which is a co-conspirator, conspirator and underwriter of this. This is not just simply Israel's genocide. This is a genocide committed by the collective West and led by Israel as trigger puller and financed by the United States and protected and promoted by the European Union, Germany, United Kingdom, France. And so I think this is a tall order, but we need to have both immediate needs addressed and also have a big picture. And this has to end. Both the siege of Gaza and the occupation of Palestine for nearly 60 years.
Dr. Zarni, thank you so much for joining us and for that very, very powerful explainer. Really, really appreciate your time and hope we catch up again soon.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, there you go. I think a very, very sad state of affairs there. A different aspect to this genocide. In simple terms, Dr. Zarni, they're saying Gaza is being environmentally ravaged. As much as the heinous human right violations, the environment is also taking a hammering. There's a new phrase that has been coined, and I think specifically for what we see in Gaza is called ecocide, where the bombings, the blockade, and just the complete destruction of infrastructure, water plants, farms, greenhouse trees have all been knocked out. And experts say it will take decades, 25 years, with limitless resources. So 25 years with limitless resources, a whole generation for the Gaza Strip to recover. So the result currently, a civilian population that is trapped in a zone where survival is becoming impossible. Not just from the bombs and the bullets that continue to rain on them, but because the land they rely on, and we know the people of Palestine, we know the people of Gaza, and just how, like us Africans, are so in touch with the soil, with the earth that is beneath their feet. They're people that like to farm. They rely on that land to live, to exist as part of who they are, and it's been destroyed. So the question that I think is important is to make a strong argument for the environmental damage that is being done in Gaza to be treated as a separate crime, a different dimension of this conflict beyond the genocide that we're seeing now. Added to it could be ecocide, the destruction to the environmental and ecological aspect of Gazan life. We are biological beings, as Dr. Zarni mentioned, and we can't be separated from ecology. Ecology that sustains us and makes sure that we living with good, better quality of life. And sadly, the people of Gaza can't enjoy that right now. So every time there's something new with Israel, unprecedented, never seen before in human memory. We've come to the end of today's edition of the show. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Tomorrow, News and Views will be coming back with Inayat Wadi. That's the Juma edition of the show. And I'll be back with you again Tuesday for my edition of News and Views, Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. But otherwise, from everyone that made today's edition of the show possible, thank you very much. Thank you for staying with us for the past 2 hours. It's been a great one. It's been another educational one. It's been another empowering one. And we'll be back with you again tomorrow, but I'll be back with you again Tuesday. For myself, Salilo, and the rest of the team, sharp.